Hi family, welcome back to the channel. To those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Kini and I am coming to you today with a little unknown Black history fact. Did you know? And I want to know, did you know the devastation of Black Wall Street? Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, a wave of racial violence destroys an affluent African American community seen as a threat to white dominated American capitalism. That meant that, back then, this town was affluent and the black dollar did not leave that community for sometimes 5 years. Now, when you think of that today, the black dollar doesn't stay in its community no more than 4 hours. And that means we are not sustaining ourselves. It means that we are not self sufficient. We have to go and buy everything that we need out of our community. So our dollar does not bounce in our community for no more than maybe 4 or 5 hours at the most. So back then, you think about the black dollar not leaving the community for maybe 5 years. That is like crazy. That meant that they had everything that they needed in their own community. They had their own doctors, their own dentists, their own hospitals, their own grocery stores, their own drugstores, everything they needed, their own entertainment, everything they needed. And because it threatened the white capitalism, it was destroyed. So what I want to do is give you a little history on it. Kind of, a lot of people don't know about Black Wall Street because it was not spoken of for many years. And the people who did speak of Black Wall Street, they were shot instantly, killed. So a lot of people would not speak on it. But now through the years, the story is slowly but surely leaking out. And what I want to do is give you a little history on it. So let's get on into this right here. In 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma Greenwood District, known as Black Wall Street, was one of the most prosperous African American communities in the United States. But on May 31st of that year, the Tulsa Tribune reported that a black man, Dick Rowland, attempted to rape a white woman, Sarah Page. Whites in the area refused to wait for the investigative process to play out, sparking 2 days of unprecedented racial violence. 35 city blocks went up in flames. 300 people died and 800 were injured. Defense of a white female virtue was expressed motivation for the collective racial violence. Accounts vary on what happened between Page and Rowland in the elevator of the Drexel building, yet as a result of the Tulsa Tribune's racially inflammatory report, black and white armed mobs arrived at the courthouse. Scuffles broke out and shots were fired. Since the blacks were outnumbered, they headed back to Greenwood, but the enraged whites were not far behind, looting and burning businesses and homes along the way. 9,000 people became homeless. This modern, majestic, sophisticated, and unapologetically black community boasted of banks, hotels, cafes, clothiers, movies, theaters, and contemporary homes, not to mention luxuries such as indoor plumbing and remarkable school systems that superiorly educated black children. Undoubtedly, less fortunate white neighbors resented their upper class lifestyle. As a result of a jealous desire to put progress, high achieving African Americans in their place, a wave of domestic white terrorism caused black depossession. The creation of the powerful black community known as Black Wall Street was intentional. In 1906, O.W. Gurley, a wealthy African American from Arkansas, moved to Tulsa and purchased over 40 acres of land that he made sure was only sold to other African Americans. Gurley provided an opportunity for those migrating from the harsh oppressions of Mississippi. The average income for black families in that area exceeded what minimum wage is today. As a result of segregation, a dollar circulated 36 times to 100 times and remained in Greenwood almost a year before leaving. Even more impressive, at that time, the state of Oklahoma had only two airports, yet six black families owned their own planes. Who can be mad at that? I know who, but who could really be mad at that? These African Americans' economic status could not save them from racially hostility of their day. Greenwood survivors recount disturbing details about what really happened that night. Eyewitnesses claim the area was bombed with kerosene and other nitroglycerins, causing infernos to rage more aggressively. Official accounts state that the private planes were on reconnaissance missions. They were surveying the area to see what happened. Despite all the economic damage, Hannibal Johnson, author of Black Wall Street From the Riot to the Renaissance in Tulsa historic Greenwood District, explains that neither the survivors nor the families ever received reparations suggested by the Tulsa Race Riot Commission. The commission recommended reparations for people who lost property and proposed the establishment of scholarship funds that did happen for a limited time. The commission also proposed initiatives for economic revitalization of Greenwood communities. Despite the tragic events, these grand ideas never manifested into a tangible reality. Wow. Wow, that's awful. But there's a little bit more. In the Tulsa Race Riot of 1921, toward an integrative theory of collective violence, the sociologist Chris M. Messler explores the underlying causes of the massacre. As a result of mass migrations to the area, driven in part by increased job opportunities, Tulsa became the city with the most African Americans in the state. With a boom in the black population and their demands for equality, perceptions of discrimination, shared experience among African Americans allow for little time for adaptation among whites. Tulsa's rapid change in racial demographics made the city ripe for a riot motivated by white animosity against black economic progress. Whites of the era equated improvements in wages and working conditions as a communistic threats. In essence, whites were resentful that blacks no longer passively accepted second-class citizenship in their own homeland. Another structural factor that played a vital role in the Tulsa race riot was segregation. Ironically, black businesses benefited from self-sufficiency, which held both benefits and drawbacks for entrepreneurship. Through maintenance of the legal separation of race and sociality, business, education, and residential areas, the structure of segregation encouraged initiative but also placed parameters by restricting African American opportunities. Messer writes, in other words, since it was against the law for blacks to shop at white-owned businesses, black businesses flourished. However, even though black businesses profited from how segregation reduced competition for black patrons, segregation also limited blacks' mobility and opportunities to achieve outside of their community. According to Messenger, the police force also contributed to the riot. Due to their ineffective leadership, they allowed mobs to gather at the courthouse for hours before seeking additional assistance. Furthermore, they actively participated in the riot by deputizing whites without discretion, arming them with guns to multiply the police force overnight. The police disregarded due to process of arresting blacks and interning them into detention camps. Meanwhile, no whites were arrested during the riot. Both politicians and the media falsely framed the Tulsa riot as an uprising started by lawless blacks. Tulsa newspapers regularly referred to the Greenwood District as Little Africa and Niggertown. African Americans in the district were labeled bad niggers who drank booze, took dope, and ran around with guns, perhaps as a result of government official stereotyping rhetoric and the media's biased reporting. Whites and blacks interpreted the racial violence differently. Generally, white politicians and residents perceived the black community as predisposed to crime and in need of social control. Messer explains. In other words, due to assumption of black criminality, whites justified deadly violence on Black Wall Street because blacks needed to be subjugated. The Tulsa World newspaper inflamed the tensions between blacks and whites by suggesting that the Ku Klux Klan could restore order in the community. Since the KKK asserted white superiority with terroristic acts such as lynching, there may be a suggestion from the mainstream newspaper that the KKK should intervene, demonstrates how white supremacy was not only legitimized but also promoted with legal impunity. In the early 1900s, there was a rise in black nationalist organizations that refused to cower in the face of KKK violence or submit to societal subordination. Whites responded to black pride and demands for equality with social control, including segregation, lynching, and pogroms. Messer writes in Mass Media and Governmental Framing of Riots, The Cause of Tulsa in 1921. Messer and his colleagues Patricia A. Bell offer further details about how the media framed the riot, igniting tensions. In essence, blacks' desires for socioeconomic progress and assertion of their rights was seen as a grave threat to white hegemony, portraying all blacks as criminals, served the black inferiority narrative, maintained Jim Crow segregation, and promoted the violent enforcement of racist ideology. For instance, the racial framing of blacks and criminals legitimized whites' congregation at the courthouse and subsequent destruction of Greenwood area. Consequently, it's no surprise that blacks perceived the riots started by whites as a massacre of the community. The community of Black Wall Street primarily occurred due to whites' generalized perception that the African Americans were out of line and needed to be put back in their place. Wow, that's a lot. I don't know how I feel about that, but that's our history. I suggest that if you want to know some more about Black Wall Street, please take some time, look it up, research it. Black Wall Street was created out of necessity. You could not shop amongst white people. You couldn't go in their restaurants. You had to go to the back. You couldn't ride on the bus with them. You had to get in the back. So Black Wall Street was created out of necessity. They did not want us there. They didn't want us shopping in their stores or anything. So when this community got together and created their own community and was self-sufficient in sustaining their own people, it became a problem. But that's how it is. We've come a long way, but we have a long ways to go. But Black Wall Street was, I have no words. I mean, the people, in spite of everything, they created their own community, and it was burned down. A lot of people died, and it was out of pure jealousy. It had nothing to do with, blacks being unruly and needed to be put back in their place. These people created a community out of necessity and did so well at it that their white counterparts didn't like it, and they thought they were uppity niggers, and they wanted to destroy it. And as they always did, as they did with Emmett Till, a black man was in the presence of a white woman and she screamed, or it was not true, and to protect her virtue, all of this started. So I wanted to bring that little black history fact to you guys. Tulsa, as of late, recently, in 2019, they started looking for the bodies. They found mass graves, and they want to start digging these graves up about around the spring of this year. They want to get these bodies up, and they want to officially bury these people and make a memorial for them. So I will be following that story up. But I want you guys to tell me, did you know about Black Wall Street? Tell me what you think about that. Tell me down below. Leave me a comment. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. I would really like to know if you have